A city under attack. We have a special report from Kilis on the Syrian-Turkish border. Also on today's program, a five-star endorsement for the five-star movement. The anti-establishment party wins 2 of Italy's largest cities. And in Picture This, putting a face to a name. Venezuela's opposition tries to validate every signature on a referendum to remove President Maduro. Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garta. Kilis is a city that stands just 4 kilometers from the Syrian border. For years, it was the first safe haven many Syrians reached after crossing into Turkey. But in the past year, it's become a part of the conflict as Daesh targets Turks and refugees alike with rocket strikes across the border. Our newsmaker today is Kilis as we look at how the city's endured 5 years on the edge of Syria's war.
Bizim çocuk şura düştü. Bura düştü. Bura düşmüş.
Ibrahim Issa's son was hit in the head by shrapnel from a rocket in this exact spot 2 months ago. He was playing football with friends in Kilis and died in hospital a few days later.
Ben o gün camiye gittim, akşam namazını kılmaya. Camide bir roket sesi duydum, bir top sesi duydum. Eve geldim, baktım bizim kadın oğlanla konuşuyor, anasıyla konuşuyor. Anasına dedi ki ne, kardeşim yaralandı hastahanada. Koştum, hastahaneye gittim, doktoru gördüm. Doktor bana dedi ki ne, durumu ağır dedi. Kafasından değmiş dedi, beyninden biraz gitmiş dedi. Yani yaşamak %5 dedi.
14-year-old Mohammed was a football fanatic who worshipped Lionel Messi. And he became just the latest victim of what's become an all-too-common occurrence in Kilis, paying the price for the rockets being fired from inside Syria by Daesh. Ibrahim fled Aleppo 4 years ago to escape the war. Since then, rebel forces and the regime have been fighting over Syria's largest city. But the war seems to have caught up with Ibrahim again. Kilis is a Turkish city that's just 4 kilometers from the Syrian border. And at the end of last year, there were more Syrian refugees living there than Turks. But then the rocket attacks started, more than 70 of them, killing more than 20 people. Now the main square is often empty. People are leaving, frightened of what else the war might bring. The city has been held up as a model of integration between the Turks and the Syrian refugees and has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. But now the future of these people and their businesses seems more uncertain. One of the industries that's been badly hit is construction. Last year, business was booming, but now many people don't want to live here. A rocket landed here too, just meters away from a new housing development. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but Mehmet Hasanekla's business has been. Last year, he built 60 flats and sold 45. This year, he hasn't built any and has sold just 5. And Syrian refugees don't want to rent property either.
Suriye'den buraya gelmelerinden dolayı bir inşaat sektörü ivme kazanmıştı. Konut talebi çok fazla olmuştu. Son yıllardaki ekonomimizi inşaat sektörü ciddi anlamda kalkındırıyordu. Ama DAEŞ saldırıları sonucu Suriyelilerin yaklaşık %50'si, Kilis halkının yaklaşık %30'u başka şehirlere geçici ya da kalıcı olarak göç ettiler.
Those that are staying are more reluctant to go out. Parks are not as busy. Shops not as full with customers. And restaurants are often nearly empty at peak times of the day. Before the rockets came, Hanifi Zor would get 200 customers a day in his restaurant. Now he's lucky to get 20, and he's thinking of closing down after Ramadan if business doesn't pick up.
Ekonomik yönden Kilis'e bir destek verilmesi gerek diye düşünüyorum. Esnaflara destek verilmesi gerek ve de bunun en kısa sürede yapılması gerek. Çünkü biz 5 aydır burada mağduruz. Psikolojik mi, ruhen devletin çıkıp Kilis'e tam olarak destek verdiğini göstermesi gerek. Çünkü Kilis esnafı kapatıyor. Kilis'in halkı da taşınmaya başladı. Bir süre sonra insan kalmayacak.
Hanifi isn't the only one that's looking to the Turkish government for help to keep essential parts of their community viable. One man who is able to address the concerns of the people of Kilis is the mayor, Hasan Kara. He was elected by the people and is a member of the ruling AK party. And we've come to the historic part of the city to talk to him. Hasan has been mayor for just over 2 years. He says the military is doing everything it can to stop the rockets, and the government is preparing a financial package to help the people. It's expected to include interest-free loans for businesses and allowing them to defer tax payments and social security contributions. Hasan says the people are bearing up well in difficult circumstances.
Batı bu işi yaşamaya cesaret bile edemez. Ben 2 gün önce Brüksel'deydim. Hala Brüksel'de bir patlama olduğundan dolayı havalimanı yarı off vaziyette. İnsanların sokağa çıkma ihtiyacı, insanların normal hayatını sürdürebilme imkanı bile kalmamış. Bugün ben şunu yeniden tekrar etmek istiyorum. Biz terörle yaşamaya alışmış bir bölgede yaşıyoruz. Biz terörle yaşarız. Ama bu iş batıya geldiği zaman batının terörle yaşaması mümkün değil. Ondan dolayı bu terörizmin kökten kurtulması lazım.
One man who's unlikely to benefit at the moment is Ibrahim, the Syrian refugee. He's unemployed and is living 60 kilometers away in Gaziantep to escape the scene of his son's death.
Bütün kendini tanıyanlar, kendini sevdiler. Dine çok önem verirdi. Abdestli namazlıdı. 12 yaşından beri 2 sene oldu. Sabah namazına uyar beni baba derdi. Sabah namazına uyarırım beni. Bazı da uyanmaz. Gün çıktıktan sonra uyanır. Bana der ki baba niye uyarmadın beni? Gene derim oğlum uyardım da uyanmadın. Der ki baba bir daha uyanmazsan üstüme suyu dök der.
He's buried Mohammed in a village right next to the border, as close to Syria as he can safely get. But it seems for him and many others in Turkey, there's no escape from the effects of the war. Andrew Hopkins, the Newsmakers, Kilis on the Turkey-Syria border.
And Andrew is here in the studio here with me now to get a bit more depth to the discussion here. It was a fascinating piece. And before we get into it, I just want us all to be reminded by our colleague Francis Collings in March when he was in Kilis. This is what happened.
Things have abated slightly, it's calmed down, there's less shouting and there's less police pushing people back. Okay. If you can still hear us, that's another missile that has just landed about 200 yards away from us off to the far side.
Okay, so Francis Collings there in Kilis in March. And Andrew, the reason I wanted us to see that is just to get that sort of reminder of him live on air in Kilis on the Turkish side of the border, and that's the sort of thing that can happen. You went, you did this fascinating piece, in-depth reporting. While you were there in Kilis, did it feel like a war zone to you?
Well, no, it didn't. There aren't widespread scenes of death and destruction on a regular basis in Kilis. What you could say about the city, though, it has changed quite a lot over the last few months. I've been visiting the city regularly over the past year and have seen the differences there. And the main problem there now is these rockets, which have started since the start of the year. And the biggest thing about them is you never know where they're going to hit or when they're going to hit. Sometimes they don't cause many problems. They land in a piece of wasteland or in a field. They don't cause much damage or many injuries. But if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you could be in serious trouble. And that's what happened to Mohammed, the boy, the 14-year-old boy who was in my report. He was playing football on a piece of wasteland with about 15 other people when the missile came down. He was hit in the head by a piece of shrapnel from that missile, taken to hospital, and unfortunately a few days later died from his injuries. But in that group of 15 people, he was the only person that was substantially injured in that rocket attack. He was the unlucky person in that group, and that is the situation that the people in Kilis sort of have to live with. They're living with the fear that one of these missiles could come down at any point. It could be them, it could be one of their friends, but they just don't know when or where that is going to happen.
Now, as the war rages on, we hear a lot about Syrians who are trying to make it to Europe, to try and sort of move west. Perhaps we don't hear enough about those Syrians who are in the country here, who are living in the border towns like Kilis, trying to make the most of a terrible situation, trying to get by, trying to survive, trying to earn an income. Like Ibrahim, the boy's father who you spoke to. Tell me what it was like talking to these people and the type of feelings it evoked in you getting their stories.
And obviously we know there's no sign that this war in Syria is going to come to an end. So these people are trying to make the best that they can of their life in Turkey, but it's very difficult for many of them. And Ibrahim himself, when he was living in Syria, he was a lawyer. He was living in Aleppo, and his standard of living was quite comfortable in Syrian terms. But then the war started. He feared for the safety of his family, so he brought them all over the border into Turkey. And since 2012, which is when he arrived, he hasn't been able to find any full-time work, despite the fact he's quite a well-educated man. He also has 8 children here with him as well, and many of those are of working age. Only one of those has been able to find a full-time job while he's been here. Now, in that report, we talked about the various raft of measures the Turkish government was going to introduce, like tax breaks, loans, that kind of thing. We also know that the Turkish government has put aside $1.75 million to act as compensation for victims of these rockets. But so far, these measures are being directed at mainly Turkish people. And we know that Ibrahim himself and people like him haven't really been able to access those funds so far.
Now, in addition to those tax breaks that you mentioned, the financial compensation to get people to stay in many ways, because people are leaving because they're afraid of the situation and it's sort of erratic, right? In addition to that, the Turkish government is planning this missile defense system, and it is taking measures to try and stop the rocket fire. Did you get the feeling from the people there that this is enough to encourage them to stay or discourage them from leaving and placate their fears?
I mean, it will certainly help to placate their fears. They were always asking for either financial help, some more reassurances about their security living in the city, that kind of thing to help them stay. But at the moment, there are still people leaving because they are fearful about their security for their lives, that kind of thing. But the Turkish government says it's doing all it can to try and stop these rocket attacks. To give you an example, it says it's targeting Daesh positions inside Syria. In May, it sent a group of special forces soldiers in there to actually take out some of these positions. And as you mentioned, this missile defense shield, which earlier in June, there was a delivery from Italy of a system which is part of NATO's commitment to protect this country. This system is going to be placed along the Syrian border, but the picture doesn't really just end there. Just over the border, there's a city in Syria called Azaz, and at the beginning of May, Daesh announced a new operation there to take more land. And it's fighting various different groups. It's fighting the YPG, it's fighting the FSA, other rebel and opposition groups. So actually working out who controls what bit of land directly opposite Kilis at any one time is quite difficult. So it doesn't really seem like there's an easy solution to be had there.
Yeah. Final question for you, and perhaps this is the most personal question for you. Last year, you sat here and I was asking you about your report going on patrol in the Aegean with the Turkish Coast Guard. That's the one side of this. On the other end of the country, in the southeast, you were in Kilis, now seeing the other side of it. You've covered geographically the sort of vast differences in the different towns, but you've also had the privilege of seeing the story evolve over time, over more than a year. How has this story evolved for you as a reporter, Andrew?
I think that it's becoming increasingly difficult for refugees to gain a feeling of security, a feeling of satisfaction for their particular situation. The war in Syria is not coming to an end. More and more people are trying to escape their home country for security. More of them are living in Turkey than ever before, and that's costing the Turkish government more and more money, which at times it's struggling to find, and why there's these various disputes going on at times with the European Union for the European Union to provide more funds for Turkey to help provide for these people. The Syrians are very sort of grateful that Turkey will allow them to live here until the war is finished. But, you know, after that, they're looking to make lives for themselves, have jobs, that kind of thing, have a decent standard of living, which, as we just discussed, is still quite difficult. And then the ones who decide that Turkey isn't the place for them, they want to try and leave, they're now being stopped by various European countries who don't want to play host to them. So it's for them, they're caught in a bind, really. It's really just getting worse and worse for them, I think.
Andrew Hopkins, always a pleasure picking your brain. Thanks. Still to come on the Newsmakers, the movement sweeping the streets of Italy's capital. And in Picture This, Venezuela's opposition faces a race against time to verify its petition to remove President Maduro. Italy's five-star movement was set up 7 years ago as a populist party with Eurosceptic and anti-establishment leanings. Now they've delivered their biggest blow to the established order to date, winning 19 towns and cities in local elections. The Newsmakers' Yvette McCullough reports.
The Eternal City, one of the world's ancient capitals, Rome has elected its first female mayor. Virginia Raggi from the anti-establishment party Five Star Movement took the historic victory with 2/3 of the vote.
I want to say that this is a fundamental, historic moment, a turning point. For the first time, at a moment when equal opportunities are still a mirage, the mayor of Rome is a woman.
As well as its first female mayor, Raggi is also Rome's youngest at age 37. She is a lawyer and has served as a city councillor for the past 3 years. Raggi has declared a new era for Rome, campaigning on a promise to end corruption.
We're going to work to bring legality and transparency to the institutions. After 20 years of bad management and after the Mafia Capitale investigation, principles have disappeared.
The Five Star Movement also claimed a big victory in the city of Turin, with Chiara Appendino winning nearly 55% of the vote. The M5S has gone from a protest movement to a major player, reflecting voters' growing discontent with mainstream parties. The Five Star Movement won 19 towns and cities in Italy's local elections, its biggest ever challenge to the party of centre-left Prime Minister Matteo Renzi. Set up 7 years ago by comedian Beppe Grillo, Five Star Movement is Eurosceptic, joining the wave of populist parties across southern Europe. It now has its first taste of real political power, but Italy's Prime Minister is downplaying the results.
No one should dramatize or minimize this result. In my opinion, we should be wise and use our common sense. We should also note that the people who voted have spoken. The people of these cities have sent a message that we should reflect on.
This comes as Matteo Renzi's ruling coalition faces accusations of widespread corruption and a referendum on constitutional reform set for October. As Virginia Raggi moves into the heart of decision-making in Italy's capital, will the Five Star Movement be able to prove it can govern and reshape Italy's political landscape. Yvette McCullough, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Rome to discuss the Five Star Movement's latest victories is Salvatore Merlo. He's a political correspondent at Italian daily newspaper Il Foglio. Thank you very much for joining us, Salvatore. Is Virginia Raggi good for Rome?
Virginia Raggi is, we'll see what Virginia Raggi is. Definitely, for sure, she won because she was able to understand the city hunger, the bad mood of this city. A city that has just is coming from a major political scandal, as you told before, Mafia Capitale. She came by saying very easy spot words like, we, the Five Star Movement, we are the good ones, the others are all corrupt and thieves, our hands are clean. And with this spot, with this very simple message, she gained a huge amount of votes. You know, almost the 70% of voters of Rome. Now she had to transform this very easy and simplistic, let me say, populistic message to something more hard, more real.
Did it help their movement and their cause that they said, we're not on the left and we're not on the right, we are post-ideological, we are not on that spectrum, we are a new politics, that this is a fresh start for fed-up people?
The message of Five Star Movement, and but now this kind of message has definitely to change if they arrive to the point of to govern a big city like Rome and another big city like Turin. If they want to rule one day, the country, they must face reality, which is not made of direct democracy held on the internet.
Prime Minister Matteo Renzi's Democratic Party, they're centre-right. Will she be getting his support and cooperation, given that she's in charge of the capital city and she's in opposition now?
It's very difficult to say. By now, the idea of Five Star Movement is that they don't want to collaborate with nobody because they have this manichaeistic idea that they are totally different and they don't have to, in any ways, mix up with other parties. Some years ago, in 2013, after the national elections, the former secretary of the Democratic Party, Pierluigi Bersani, tried to make an alliance with the Five Star Movement. He offered them to get into the government or to collaborate somehow into the parliament with the left, and they totally refused.
Salvatore Merlo, thank you very much for joining us. In today's Picture This, thousands of Venezuelans have been queuing up across the country. It's because the government says the opposition must verify the identities of everyone who signed a petition calling for Nicolas Maduro to resign. Let's take a look.
Que el pueblo se exprese. La solución a la crisis que vive nuestro país es consultarle al pueblo venezolano. El pueblo venezolano tiene en sus manos la decisión.
Today's newsmaker has been the city of Kilis. It sits just 4 kilometers from the border with Syria and has been a staging post for many fleeing the civil war. It would be easy for its residents to be resentful of the death and destruction that has followed the refugees across the border, but instead they have rallied around their newest neighbors, a show of unity that earned them a nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize. You've been watching this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garta. As always, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.